Okay, and it's now recording. So we have 7 persons now.
So then, did you encounter any issues with the video that I sent you, the video clip for Marie-Paul?
No, not at all. No.
Okay.
I could allow them, and I tried to play them also on Teams, and it worked well. So yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Problem. Thank you for the video and everything. Can you see my? No, sorry. Nothing. Okay, so should we start admitting participants? Sophia, are you ready to start, or should we wait a few more minutes? We have
it's only 7, right? Only 7 participants?
We have 9 of them now, yeah.
I can only see 7.
Okay. I don't know why we have different numbers.
Currently in this meeting, 7.
Oh, I think I'm the only one who can see the guests waiting in the lobby.
Ah, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, well then you tell me when you think it's time.
Well, if that's fine with you, maybe we can start admitting them and then see if there are more people joining. Yeah. Okay, I start admitting them, and I leave the floor to you. Hello everyone. Welcome to the side event A. We're really happy to have you here today. Thank you very much. So I will leave the floor to Sophia Berlind, who is the moderator of this side event. So Sophia, I leave the floor to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's about 2 minutes past, so I think it's time to get started. Welcome to Workshop A, or Side Event A as it's called, in this year's conference program. The overall theme for this session is software and hardware for the benefit of victim support services. My name is Sophia Barlind, and I'm with Victim Support Sweden. I'm speaking to you as a disembodied voice today. There's no webcam on this computer, but still I've been asked to moderate this session in addition to giving one of the presentations later. There is time allotted for questions and discussion, so I'd like to encourage everyone to write down any questions or thoughts which may come to mind as we're listening to the speakers. Write those down in the chat window, and I'll try to have the speakers answer and clarify, and we'll hopefully begin an interesting and fruitful conversation. And in addition to that, I'd like to remind everyone to try and keep the schedule so we can try and divide the time fairly evenly between the 3 presentations during this session. Okay, then let's begin for presentation 1, which will be around 25 minutes total, so until around 3 o'clock. I'd like to welcome our friends from France Victime to present 2 of their current innovative projects. digital tablets for victims in rural areas, presented by Marie-Paul Carré-Lubin, director of France Victimes 37, and the Memo du Vie project, presented by digital project manager Léa Pellegrin. Marie-Paul and Léa, I'm sorry if my French was a bit off, but I'm handing it over to you now, and you have the floor.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. The question, how to bring justice closer to the litigants? How to ensure that victims living in rural areas are treated in the same ways as victims living in the cities? How to ensure that a victim support service made of 8 people can be simultaneously in the north and the south of the department? The solution is the video conference. We were inspired by an idea already implanted in another department, the Charente. It's a digital device which consists of making a digital tablet available to victims who go to the gendarmerie, which will make a video conference possible, with a Skype application that we have chosen, between the victim and the victim support service. This system works thanks to strong partnerships with the gendarmerie, which not only provide its Wi-Fi access for interviews, but also actively participate in the promotion of the system, as the video clip you showed. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the gendarmerie for the production of this quality video. In the context of quick hearings for immediate summons, this allows us, through the gendarmerie, to be immediately, directly in the contact with the victim. We can inform victims of their rights in the real time, reading the hearings which arrive very quickly. The same is true for situations which require particular reactivity, especially regarding matters of domestic violence. This device was designed to meet the needs of the most vulnerable people, minors, the elderly, and of cases of domestic violence, of which eye contact is very reassuring for the victim. This tool also allows us to implement the evaluation victims measure in according in the 2015 European Directive, which institutes personalized assessment of victims. Since for each complaint, particularly in matter of domestic violence or sexual violence, major of minor, the investigator sends us the complaint so we can directly contact the victim to carry out this assessment. We first can in reactivity. This also allows us to deploy more easily in the territory without too many additional costs. Indeed, when the tablets have been purchased, all that remained is the salary of the jurist in charge of these interviews that we have specially hired. Despite a promising start for this device and a real enthusiasm for this production, we have not yet been able to finance the dedicated position. But I'm optimistic by nature, and I really believe in the usefulness of the victims of the video conference meeting. And I have no doubt that today keen's ears will hear our requests and relay them. Thank you for your attention, and I'm available should you have any question, and please excuse me for my bad English. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask you something just, how does the tablet get to the victim? Do they pick it up, or what are the instructions when they get the tablet?
The tablet is on police station.
Mm-hmm.
So victims this tablet is in the police, or it's possible at home, or in any location where the victim is, especially a hospital, for example. Is it clear?
Okay.
Ouais.
Okay, thank you. Yes. And is it just legal information and contact with the police and the lawyers, or is it also the support services through France Victime that is able to speak to the victims through the tablet?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I think we'll just have this short video to complete my post presentation on the tablets. So.
We don't have sound, Solène.
Sorry, let me try again.
Agir contre les violences conjugales est un engagement de notre gouvernement. Je vais voir parce que ça s'est pas bien passé hier avec mon homme. Seulement 18% des victimes déposent plainte par peur de représailles de leurs conjoints et par méconnaissance du système judiciaire. Depuis le mois de juillet 2020, France Victime 37 s'associe avec le groupement de gendarmerie d'Indre-et-Loire pour permettre aux victimes de bénéficier d'une information juridique en droit pénal via une visioconférence. Pour cela, 5 tablettes numériques sont réparties dans les brigades les plus isolées du département. Avec sa mobilité, la tablette répond aux contraintes du monde rural.
Beaucoup de victimes n'ont pas les moyens, n'ont pas la possibilité, n'ont peut-être pas le temps non plus de s'éloigner trop de leur domicile. La mobilité des tablettes permet de transporter la tablette plutôt que la victime. Ça, c'est vraiment le principe clé.
Au sein de la brigade, la victime peut parler en toute sécurité et être conseillée gratuitement par des juristes de l'association France Victime.
La tablette numérique, elle rentre vraiment dans une dynamique de visibilité, de disponibilité de la victime. Elle permet une interaction humaine, chose qu'on ne pourrait pas faire finalement au téléphone. Ça permet à la victime d'avoir une meilleure compréhension des propos qu'on est en train de lui tenir, parce que le langage juridique est difficile. Quand on est réfléchi en tout cas à un éventuel dépôt de plainte. On peut bien déposer plainte, mais j'ai peur qu'il aille en prison.
Augmenter le nombre de dépôts de plainte pour juger les auteurs, c'est participer à la lutte contre les violences conjugales. Même si le système est toujours en phase d'expérimentation, les résultats sont déjà prometteurs.
On a eu une situation, effectivement, au cours de laquelle la victime s'est rendue en gendarmerie, voulait évoquer les faits dont elle était victime, mais ne voulait surtout pas déposer plainte. Après échange avec elle, par le biais de cette tablette numérique, la victime a finalement déposé plainte et par la suite, une audience a eu lieu. C'est plutôt porteur de succès pour le moment.
Thank you. Would you like to continue with your talk then, Leah? And if there are any questions for Marie-Paul, then we'll take them also at the end of your session, I think. Go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I'm going to start with sharing my screen. Just 1 second, please. Are you all able to see it clearly?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. Okay, so this presentation is about Memo de Vie, which is a platform of France victims to help the victim break the cycle of violence. Memo de Vie is accessible on all digital material like smartphones, computers, and tablets. So Memo de Vie is the result of a citizen consultation initiated by make.org in November 2017. Many ideas were given by citizens to fight violence against women. Among them, there was an application that would allow victims to keep track of events, access reliable resources, and securely store items that could facilitate the possible filing of a complaint and an investigation. Convinced that such a solution was relevant and could also be addressed to any victim of repeated violence, France Victim has joined forces with make.org and many take-for-good firms to develop this platform. And at every step of the process, we included victims of domestic violence to help us define the functionalities, the user interface, and future updates. And we also made sure to consult different experts to guide and advise us, such as developers, lawyers, social workers, cybersecurity experts, or graphic designers. And since then, several ministries, such as the Ministry of Justice or Gender Equality, also supported financially this project. So I'm going to show you a little demonstration because it will more easily speak for itself. So I'm going to go full screen. Okay. So this is the platform. So to log in, I have to enter my email address and a password. I am then asked for a 4-digit code, which is a double security. A pop-up then asks me for my mood of the day, which will be put in the calendar that you can see behind. This calendar helps the victim visualize the repetition of violence and become aware of it, which is a real issue, especially for domestic violence. On the left of my screen, there is my diary. The timeline shows a preview of all of the events I have registered in my diary. To add an event, I must first enter a date, whether it is past or present. I can go back in time. And then I have to feel a feeling of safety, from very good to danger, which is associated with a color. I can add a title and a description of the facts. I can also illustrate my event with media content like picture, video, or audio file. And once I've saved the event, it is added to my timeline. Each event is circled in a color that represents the feeling of safety associated with it, from green for very good to red for danger. Just like the calendar, the goal is to help the victim visualize and become aware of what they are going through. I can download my diary with all of the content, all of the events I have saved in it. I can also share a specific event, like we can see just about now. And I can share the event, but also the media that are associated with it. The second functionality is the secure space, which is separated into parts. So this part is for official documents, such as identity card, medical certificate, or a complaint. The second one is for various media content, such as pictures, videos, or audios. Those elements can be used as clues or evidence by the police or legal professional. I can download and share them easily which can help simplify administrative and judicial procedures. In the contact functionality, I can find emergency number in red, but also number to get victim support. I can also fill out a form to get victim support from a professional within France Victims Network. The last feature is the library, which offers contents to help victims with a variety of thematics such as health, social, or laws. User safety during the navigation was our priority during this project. So for example, if I want to go back to from a non-sensitive functionality to a sensitive functionality, just like I did in my diary, I am then asked once again to enter a 4-digit code. This 4-digit code is asked once again if I want to edit or delete any event or media I have added to my space. If I need to quickly and discreetly exit the platform, I can press this button. It will redirect me to a weather website. So that's it for this little demonstration. Okay. Sorry. So Memo de Vie helps victims describe and remember facts, become aware of the situation of abuse, and find useful information and contacts to break the cycle of violence. Finally, it allows the user to save and share evidence or clues easily. Those issues do not only apply to victims of domestic violence. Memo de Vie can also be useful for any victim of repeated violence, such as victim of harassment, discrimination, human trafficking, or even the closed one to victim that can fill the diary for the victim. So the platform link was sent to France Victim Network and more specifically to the pillar territories in November. In November, actually next Monday, we will launch the experimentational phase on the national French territory. We will rely on the association of the network to disseminate the tool at the local level. And during this time, the Federation will communicate on the institutional level. This synergy will allow a valid dissemination of the tool to prescribers. And it will also allow us to collect feedback for a possible public launch at the end of the first half of 2021. So that's the end of this presentation, and if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them.
Thank you so much. I'll get started with the questions. I have some questions. When you were consulting with victims as you prepared this app and as you were doing the research phase, what were the victims' primary concerns and needs and wishes for an app like this? What did they want and what did they need?
Well, it depends if the victim was still in a situation of violence or was already out of it. For people who were already out of violence, they were saying that they wish they had picked up the clue and could remember clearly the historic of violence. So they said that they would need the tool to write everything so they can remember exactly what happened when they file a complaint, for example.
And did you consult with police and justice system also in developing this, and what was their input? I'm thinking primarily from a legal point of view, or like a collection of evidence point of view. What was their input?
Actually, they were consulted at every step, but they also made a thing for the next update. So there is the thing that everything you put in the diary is declarative, so it's only the word of the person victim. So with the feedback from the police, for example, we will add something to register every edit that is done to an event, so that if it goes to justice, if it goes to court, you can say, okay, the event was added on a certain date, it was then edited at the other date, and media was added at this date. So that was the feedback we had from the police.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's clear.
Oh, it's perfectly clear.
Okay.
Well, I was also wondering about the who has access to the data. Is the personnel on France Victime, do they have access to the personal data inside, or is it only the user who can see what they have written in their diary and so on? How's that managed?
Actually, it's only the user who can have access to this space, because we were thinking of the diary because we want people to feel like they can tell everything. You know, it's like a secret diary, and you can tell everything, like the good parts of your relationship, the good parts of your life, and the bad parts. Mm-hmm. And so you know that a professional, for example, your lawyer, has access to this diary. You won't write the same thing as if you're doing it for yourself. So we think that it's better to have all the elements, so we made it only for the user, which he can share after what he wrote, but the only access is for the user.
Mm-hmm. And how do you plan on making this more known to the public after you've launched it? Are you planning a campaign? How do you plan to target the domestic violence victims, or will there be targeting of other groups as well?
Actually, it's kind of difficult because we first thought that we would do a public launch with the especially for domestic violence, but there was this dilemma that if we explain everything and make Memo Devi known to everyone, it will also make it known to abuser. Mm-hmm. They could look through the phone and maybe find something. So for now, we are thinking about the strategy of a public launch. For now, we focus on a professional and institutional level, but after we will try to find a strategy to publicly launch it, and maybe target especially people victim of harassment at work, for example, so that abuser of domestic violence won't feel concerned about this one because they will think it's for another type of victim.
Mm-hmm. Is there anyone else that has a question for Leah or for Marie-Paul earlier? Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Let's see if we can move on. I'll get my notes. Yes, I think we'll move on now then for presentation 2, which will also be around 25 minutes. And I'd like to invite Professor Davidson and Dr. Karajo from the University of Strathclyde to tell us about their exciting new smartphone app for collecting survey data in a lifetime diary format. Take it away, Jennifer and Dimitar.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure for us to be here today. So I am the executive director. Let me just tell you who I am, and then Dimitar will jump in. I'm the executive director of something called the Institute for Inspiring Children's Futures, based at the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow, Scotland. And the Institute has a vision of children and young people being supported to be able to achieve their potential fully, and especially we're focused on children who are facing adversity. And I'll let Dimitar.
Thank you, Jennifer, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dimitar, and I'd like to thank the organizers as well for the invitation. I recently completed my PhD in public health and health policy from the University of Strathclyde, and my research interests include using mobile phones to collect research data. And on that basis, I was asked to join the 4P-Log project, which we're going to talk about, to help with certain aspects of the project, such as study design and particularly data analysis as well.
Thanks, Dimitar. Unlike Dimitar, I am completely not in any way knowledgeable about technology, so I am finding this this session really interesting, and I have found the last several months in our development of this app really such a learning curve. So I'm pleased to share with you really that my perspective that I bring is very much about practice change and policy change, and that's the environment that we're working in as we use this app. Our presentation today is intending to touch on really 4 things. So I'll take us through an overview of the app and some of the very sort of early learning that and reflections that Dimitar and I have on things so far. And then Dimitar will take us through the ethical and practical considerations and some of the opportunities for a diversity of applications of this app. But really our intention here is to offer you a prompt for your imagination of how might this be useful in the contexts and in the challenges and missions that you have. So I'll start with sharing a promotional video that is 2 minutes long that captures quite a bit in a short time. So let me just get this going here. And you'll let me know, I hope, if there's no sound as I press play, but hopefully it will be. So this is our website with the app direct links, as you can see. And then here's the first video that I'd like to share with you. I'm going to open this up first. I'm the director of the Institute for Inspiring Children's Futures, based at the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow. Inspiring Children's Futures is keenly working to try and understand how we can close the gap between what are our global ambitions for children and the reality for children. And this gap is increasing with COVID. We really want to understand how children are doing. We know there are people who are working with them who can let us know what's happening with the services that are normally provided for children and what kind of innovations they might be developing. We developed a smartphone app to ask practitioners and policymakers, as well as those who are supervisors and managers who are all working towards children's well-being, what are they seeing, what can they tell us, and what innovations have been working. And so we spoke to different key partners, from UN-based partners to international NGOs to advocacy organizations, to ask, what do you think of this, and would you like to develop this with us? A really lovely group of 16 key partners have come together to help us to shape how this might work, for us to ask the best kinds of questions over the series of themes.
The COVID 4P log will help us find out are adapting to be able to cope with this situation. This anonymized way of gathering information will help us to advocate for better policies for children, as well as design better programs.
The project will unify professionals in different countries and in different societal sectors. Together, we can find innovative solutions to protect our children, to provide their unique needs, and to promote child participation.
There's real value, we hope, in this for you, because it allows you to be able to see very quickly what's happening across the world. So your contributions informs a much bigger global understanding of what's happening for children, but also we will be turning this data around in real time very quickly so that you will be able to see the themes that are emerging within a few weeks of the app starting to be used. So if you're a practitioner, a supervisor, a manager, or a policymaker in any way related to children's well-being, we would love to ask you to begin to use the app to let us know what you're seeing. Oh, sorry. So I will find a way to come back to you from the screen. There we go. Good. I'm not sure how the quality of that video was, so I apologize if it was a little bit choppy. I had a little sign that came up on my screen saying it was a little tricky, so thank you for sticking with it. So let me just give you a little bit of an overview of our purpose and the aims of the app that goes beyond the information that I've just shared here. The purpose of the app is to gather this information, as you've heard from the video, through on children's well-being and how they're doing through a child rights lens. What we're interested in is seeing what people who are around children, particularly those who are working in public services, who are seeing the change that the pandemic has created with lockdown and other realities, so that we can get a sort of a whole number of different perspectives on what's happening for children. So the smartphone app is free to download. It's across 29 countries and 5 continents, as you've seen. It asks one main question a day over the course of 8 weeks, and the 8 weeks cover a different set of themes each week. And these have been developed in partnership with, as you've seen, a number of different organizations. These organizations reflect quite a range of partners. So, for example, we have the OECD, as you've seen, which will be for higher income countries. We have and who are policy oriented, and then we have UN bodies like the Special Representative of the Secretary General of the UN on Violence Against Children. And then we have capacity building organizations who are looking to generate new knowledge and understanding of what the capacity, what social services, new skills might need to be to respond in the pandemic, right through to advocacy organizations and child rights organizations. The data that we collect is anonymous. There's no tracking of any Google Analytics, any sort of analytics on the phone. People choose to share the information they choose to share, and that's all we have on that person. And at the moment, it's available just in English. We just launched this last month, and so it's just beginning to, we're just beginning to see some of the findings. I think the byproduct of the use of this app is also that it allows for a feedback loop, so that we are here, for example, 1 week is about children's participation, and we are taking the findings of an international child participation survey, and we're feeding those into questions, and we're putting to practitioners and policymakers some of the things that children have said, to hear what those practitioners would say about what children have said is important to them. So in doing so, we're then also working with young people to help analyze the data after that. So in that way, we're hoping to create a little bit more of a circle. And in answering the questions, it also informs the app user about expectations of children's rights and children's well-being. The reason we're undertaking this, the use of the app really is because of a number of elements. One is that we're recognizing under COVID that children's rights have really been under the radar. Children haven't been a priority in the public health measures or the considerations, and for various understandable reasons perhaps, but it's important that we can hear from children. And this was our effort at trying to contribute to that, listening about what children's experiences might be. Another is that in the context of professional practice, the space for reflection has shrunk in the relentless challenges that are existing for those who are working in the sector at the moment. And so this app offers a little bit of space to ask people to reflect on what they're seeing each day. We also recognize that there's a real shrinking in the civic space for where perhaps participation might normally be happening to try and inform policymakers. And so this also, we hope, creates a little bit of an increase in the space that people can contribute their views to share the intelligence to policymakers. I have another video to share with you, which is actually about the app. It's an instructional video. I think what I'd like to check with you, Sophia, is whether the quality of the video was sufficient to play the second video, or should I just?
I think it was, and it was interesting. So I think go ahead.
Okay, I'll do that then. So once again, we make a journey to the website, and here we are on using the app then. And this time we have a nice Scottish accent.
No, there's no sound.
I will fix that. Sorry about that. Here I was pleased with myself. I managed to share the first one. That's what I've done. I've missed the switch. Here we go.
On the pink button to move through the screen.
I'll just start from where we.
Please do read the terms and conditions carefully. If you're willing to participate in the study, the 3 criteria at the bottom of the screen, please confirm this by tapping on each button. To help us better appreciate your particular circumstances, we'll ask you a few questions about what areas you work in and what your responsibilities are. When you've added your answers, just press Submit to record them. You'll then be taken to your first daily log question. You can type your answer in the text box or use the speech-to-text function to say your response instead. When you're ready to give your response, please press Submit. You can now explore the other features of the app using the navigation bar along the bottom. In the Settings tab, you can turn off or turn on the notifications. You can also change the time of day that you'll get reminded to fill in your log. In the settings, there's also a button to delete all your responses that the app has stored on your phone. It'll mean that the responses are no longer visible in the application, but if you want to have your data removed from the project database, please contact us. Pressing the calendar button in the navigation bar will let you view and edit the responses that you've given over the previous 7 days, or over the next 7 days if it's at the start of a week. Tap on any day with a pink dot to view that day's questions. If you've already completed the question, you can then go in and edit it. You can also complete unanswered questions here, so ones that you might have missed, or ones for later on in the week if you prefer to answer several questions at a time. The FAQ button provides answers to important questions about the project and how you can contact the researchers. In the information part of the navigation bar, you can find links to the project website and another link to this instructional video. So thanks again for downloading the COVID-4P log app. Please visit our website for more information. Follow us on Twitter for updates on the project going forward.
Okay, so I think we are back. Am I back with you?
Yes, you're back. And that is very helpful to actually see the app in motion. So I think that was great.
Okay, super. Well, I think maybe just briefly before I hand over to Dimitar to say that it's very early days for us in actually seeing what the findings are. But I think I can share with you that we have learned already that, boy, you have to put a lot of testing and testing and testing into an app to make sure that all the bugs are sorted out. It's remarkable the number of times that we think, oh no, wait, now we've got it sorted, and then we've had some other feedback about something that we had missed. So lots of testing. I think in terms of the recruitment and the amount of drop off, there's some. This is a bit of a pioneering type of app that Dimitar will explain why that is. But so we don't really have good measures to get a sense of whether this, how many people we would expect to download versus how many people would use it, versus how many people would still be using it by the end of the 8 weeks. And so it's a bit of it's a research piece for us to find out. And what we found is it's taken a great deal of effort to actually ensure people take up and begin to use the app, but that the stabilization after people have demonstrated that they are committed to using the app is about sort of 15% of if we have 100% of the people who accept and download the app, we have about 15% who are committed users, which isn't far off what we might see in some sort of regular survey data. I would be delighted to hand things over now to Dimitar, who will give you another perspective on sort of a bigger picture of the ethical and practical considerations and the opportunities that you might think about in relation to your own work. So Dimitar, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'll just share my screen and my presentation with all of you. Oh, I'm frozen for some reason, so please bear with me. Waiting to upload the. Okay. It'll take a few seconds. Okay, so I will briefly talk about some of the ethical and practical considerations of smartphone app-based surveys a bit more broadly, but with reference to some of the challenges and strengths we've encountered in our own projects. So there are both pros and cons to a mobile survey format in general. Some of the advantages include the ability to cost effectively and time effectively conduct data and collect data from large samples, including geographically diverse samples, including from individuals in low and middle income countries and rural and urban regions, and this also ensures a good diversity and representation of participants. Mobile surveys are also very useful for collecting longitudinal insights over a longer period of time, of several weeks or even several months. It allows for instant data transfer between participants logging their data and us researchers having access to the data, which makes it really, really useful for urgent topics, for example, in states of emergencies. It is a user-friendly format and also allows for ecologically rich insights about participants' day-to-day practice. There are certain disadvantages. For example, those types of survey formats rely very much on participants' motivation to complete the survey, because it's a less personal approach that, for example, face-to-face data collection. We are very much reliant on participants' interest and sustained motivation. And also there are challenges to managing a large amount of data that can be generated from such surveys, and in interpreting such data, which very often lacks sufficient context. So we have to be very careful as to how we interpret, and because we're not able to necessarily probe or ask follow-up questions, this presents a different challenge. I'd like to mention a few of the practical considerations that I think are key in designing such study and making it sustainable and useful, particularly for in terms of question design. So we combined open-ended questions with closed-ended questions, including Likert or scale type questions, just to provide a more dynamic format and to make it easier for participants to complete. The tasking strategy is crucial here, referring to the schedule according to which questions are asked. In our study, participants followed a predefined schedule of questions over a 8-week period of time, in which participants could only see questions a few days in advance, and they're normally asked between 1 and 5 questions per day. Over an 8-week period. Once again, participants were also sent reminders to complete a question questions on a day-to-day basis, which is also crucial, I think, to ensuring sustained engagement. Also, the questions were validated by diverse stakeholders, including service providers and young people, to ensure that the questions are neutral, the language is accessible, and they're non-leading. But also that they're personal versus heavily technical and using scientific terms that might put off participants. And we really put effort and thought into lowering participant burden. And by participant burden, I mean the cognitive and physical effort of participation. For example, by having only 1 question a day, on average, also by allowing participants to use the voice-to-text option, giving participants control to set reminders and delete their data from the phone, from their phones, etc. And also designing questions to be relatively straightforward and clear. Some of the ethical considerations are also key here, in particular, informed consent, which we embedded during the onboarding process in the app, anonymity, non-coercion. Participants were not offered any monetary or material incentives to participate. Instead, participation is really based on the assumption of the understanding of the importance of sharing their very, very valuable insights on the ground of the challenges that they face and their ideas for improving policy and practice. Participants were also empowered to withdraw from the study if they wish to do so, and given a clear procedure as to how to do that through the app. We also were very careful about managing participants' expectations. For example, ensuring that participants are aware that this is not a therapeutic tool, but rather a research tool. And also, for example, communicating to participants that if they have serious concerns about the well-being of a certain client or child, that they should follow appropriate routes via authorities rather than reporting that through the app. By equity, I mean ensuring that the app is available and accessible to people in diverse geographical settings. And by beneficence, we refer to the impact of participation on the participants, and I'll speak about this on the next slide. The risk for participants is deemed to be low, relatively low for this project because of the anonymous data collection. Although there is always the chance that participants will share data that, for example, contain names of people, places, or organizations. However, we are very careful about screening the data before analyzing it to ensure that we anonymize any names that should not appear. And participants also informed and encouraged to only report data anonymously. There's also the risk of participant fatigue, especially over a period of 8 weeks and answering more than 200 questions in total, which we were very mindful of. And really, participants were given the option not to answer any questions that they might not want to answer. They can join, they can skip a day and answer the questions on the next day. And they also, again, were given a variety of question types, including closed and open-ended questions. And I'd like to give you some quotes from participants. This is our first wave of participants that and their responses to the questions about how their participation in the survey impacted, if at all, their well-being and their work, and what are the overall experiences of the app. And here are some quotes from, for example, is to help children or too complex or technical. There are also opportunities for us to potentially target specific subpopulations of, for example, service providers in a particular country or region, or policymakers, or service managers in a particular region. And there's also this persistent challenge of improving our recruitment and retention rates to really understand what makes participants more likely to engage. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll very much welcome any questions, and also in particular about the opportunity to potentially implement this or similar apps for example, as a self-care tool, as a support tool for service providers, or others. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm curious to know a little bit about, are you still developing new questions continually, or had you already decided on exactly the questions you needed before the app launched, or how's that working?
Shall I jump into for this one? So through the process, we have one more week to go for the first people who downloaded it 7 weeks ago to complete the 8th week. So over the course of this time, we have been developing new questions within the context of the frame, the themes that we knew we would be asking questions about each week. So we fine-tuned them as we got closer to the time that they were due to be put into the app, in order to make sure they were very relevant to the current context of the pandemic. But once next week's questions are uploaded, we've checked them out with the key partners, then that will be the set of 8-week questions that will run for anyone who downloads the app. And we're looking to probably mid-December take the app off the Google Store and Apple Store, so that we can begin to do some analysis on this first cohort of users.
Are you using any questions that are recurring that you ask at more than one point over the 8 weeks to track any changes, or have you? How you view?
Yeah, so there's a couple of sets of questions we're keen to repeat, which are things like actually specifically about using the app. How easy has it been? What have been the challenges? What's been motivating you to use the app, so that we can get some insights into this for the next round of users.
Mm-hmm. Fredrik asks in the chat, and everyone is welcome to use the chat. It's been very quiet. What were the development times for this app? Did you already have a method for collecting data in a similar way, a calendar-based log before COVID-19, or was this actually developed from scratch after the pandemic started?
This was a response in really late March to realizing suddenly the normal avenues we might have, for me in Scotland in the work that I do, the normal avenues we would have to be able to understand what's happening for children had completely shut down. And we had no way of really, because people were so focused on the emergency measures, the communications had just gone quiet for us to get a sense of what's happening for children. And that we realized we needed to compensate for that. So we spent several months developing the app and bringing together the partnership, realized that this was a challenge globally and not just for Scotland, and brought in international partners to think about what they needed. And so it's been developed since April.
And how have you managed to promote it, Well, how have people in different countries found it? Are they invited to take part, or how does that work?
We recognize the limitations of our tiny research team in Glasgow to be able to promote this if we didn't have great networks through all of our key partners. And so the key partners, which are international organizations for the most part, identified which countries they felt they'd be able to promote the app in the best, which is how we determined the 29 countries in which it's live. And they have connected with their national partners, and it's been to some great developments in, say, Kenya and Philippines, less so in other parts. And so we're hoping for 4 to 5 countries that become our spotlight countries, where we can have a big enough data set to be able to do some analysis that's useful. But the way in which we've been advertising it has predominantly been social media, through people's newsletters and websites, and really the reach that our key partners have into individual countries.
And a question from me, who I work with data collection a lot, and one of my concerns is always what sort of format are you asking the questions? If the answers are mainly free-form writing, how then do you actually process and summarize the info given if it's no structured format, or is it a structured format?
Thank you. Dimitar, you jump in with this one.
Yes, no problem. So we have a diversity of question, a variety of question formats. Yes, our most common question format is the open-ended format, which is really in recognition of the amazingly rich insights that can only emerge by asking open-ended questions, in my opinion, especially for certain topics. We also have close-ended questions, such as multiple choice questions, and scale-based or Likert-based type questions, or some yes or no questions. We are going to have to use qualitative data analysis software to manage this large body of and a large amount of data, particularly qualitative data. So we have put effort and time into ensuring we have an existing infrastructure in place to be able to carry out the analysis efficiently. We are using NVivo, which is a popular qualitative data analysis software that we're going to particularly utilize for analyzing the open-ended responses, which we are going to analyze using some automation, for example, by calculating word frequencies. But we're also going to, of course, rely on the sort of human-based or manual coding or line-by-line coding that we'll have to impose on the data in order to communicate efficiently and concisely the key insights. But absolutely, qualitative data analysis for such a large scale is one of the key challenges to this type of projects in terms of analysis.
Well, thank you so much for your presentation. I think we'll move on now, and then I hope all of you in the chat will think of something to to start the discussion after I've been speaking, because I'm next. The third presentation is mine, and let's see if I can move along to my script here. Yes, and I'll just start the sharing. Let's see, there it is. So there's the screen, I hope. Okay, so this section is called Digital Case Management Systems and Data Collection for Victim Support Organizations. Like I said at the beginning, I'm with Victim Support Sweden, and I have been for a long time. I do a lot of different things, everything from writing guidelines and policies and doing surveys and liaising with our local offices and liaising with authorities and government agencies, the police, for instance. And I'm also responsible for overseeing all of our data collection and our office databases. So there's a lot of managing data analysis and presentation of data. And I've been managing the organization's collection of victim data, which is what we're primarily interested in here today, collating it, structuring it, analyzing it, presenting it for more than 10 years. And up until now, I'm sorry, our collection of statistical information about the victims has been a painstakingly manual process. Actually, the volunteers working in the local support centers collect data on paper, and the coordinators then transfer the information into an Excel sheet, one case at a time, row by row. And this is then sent to our national offices once a year. And the organization as a whole, the local centers all the way down to the frontline workers, the volunteers, have been prepared to do that manually in accordance to very strict guidelines. We actually have Soviet-like report rates. For those of you old enough to remember Soviet election statistics, it's always 100%. And every local center hands in a complete data set every year and has done so for more than 10 years. So it is doable, but it's labor intensive to collect and present solid statistics for 32,000 victims a year just using paper forms and Excel. But what's really difficult to do manually and on paper is case management. In the course of helping the victim, it's not just about collecting statistics. You have an ongoing case. There are multiple calls and you collect information about the victim. You need somewhere to put the contact info. You add notes, you add activities and so on. If you're a coordinator of a victim support service, you need to keep track of which volunteer has which case and who's free to take new ones, etc. It's not exactly a streamlined process to do this with pen and paper. And in Sweden, transfer of data from the police is done today by individual police officers sending cases one by one to the 99 different local service points. It's time consuming for the police service, and it affects how many referrals we get, and it varies greatly across Sweden. But if we had one digital space and then theoretically the police could send their data to one single address to be imported in one batch, and it would save everyone a lot of hassle. Also with the EU legislation about personal data, the GDPR, sending data like we do over email, keeping it on paper, with 1,300 individual volunteers, how do you make sure everybody handles the data safely and that everybody deletes every instance of it within the correct time frame? That's a nightmare from a legal standpoint, and the digital case management system would solve some of that at least. And for all these reasons, we've been wanting to make the switch from our manual method of collecting statistics into a modern case management system, all data for the whole organization, the 71 centers and the national 116 helpline in one place. And this also includes a database with information about our local support centers and all of our volunteers, coordinators, staff, and other members. And so we found some room in the budget last year to begin and throw some money at this. And at the start of this project, we had the opportunity through our membership with Victim Support Europe to ask other victim support organizations across Europe if we could have a look at what they're doing, how their case management system works, what data they're collecting, what tools are built in, and what experiences they have had building and using it. So during 2019, I was fortunate enough to have distance meetings via Skype with 10 different victim support organizations from 10 countries in Europe who have showed me their systems and how they use them. And so I have met with the following countries. I think some of you are here in this group today. I met with Finland, Northern Ireland, Portugal, England and Wales, Netherlands, Scotland, Germany, Czech Republic, Austria, and France. And I even went to visit our colleagues in the Netherlands who are very advanced and head of the field in all of things victim support. And I've seen their system in more detail. And it's been immensely helpful when planning our own system, and I can't thank you all enough for your help. But this became sort of a mini research project, and the idea with this presentation is maybe some of what I learned in talking to these colleagues about your case management systems could be useful to the victim support family in general. But the difficult thing about summarizing it is that every country has a different platform and it all looks very different on screen. Here are some examples. So finding the common denominators and trying to pinpoint what solutions and tools could be regarded as best practice is difficult. It isn't straightforward. It is rather like having 10 different kinds of fruit. You have an apple, a banana, and an orange, and you know they're all fruits, but you're being asked to describe what makes them similar and what makes them different. So what I'm trying to say is it's basically impossible to summarize everything I've learned in a few minutes, but this is some of what I found when researching and speaking to our colleagues across Europe. Let's try and figure out what kind of informations and functions, what sort of building blocks would you need to build a case management system for victim support. Well, you probably need basic, strictly foundational information, which you have to collect and sort out beforehand. You build the database and make underlying connections so that the country's geographic regions, the counties, the municipalities, and sometimes even down to postcodes are correctly structured so that towns belong to counties and counties belong to regions and so on. And this is also done then for the victim support service organization itself. How is that structured? Who's responsible for what? And it may also be necessary to bring into the database the structure of the police service or the prosecution or even the court system, and how all of these relate to one another so that when a case is registered, you have the ability to see to whom it belongs at all times. And then the same thing goes with the people within the organization. Who's going to be involved with victim data? What are their credentials, their name, their contact info, their titles or roles? Which local center or department do they belong to? There may be notes about their training. Are they a staff? Are they volunteer? And so on. So the people within the organization and information about them. And in addition, at this point, you need to think about access and security clearance. Who has access to what? When someone logs in, do they see their own cases? Can they see all the cases for their area, or can they see the whole country? The organizations I've spoken to have made different decisions there. Can the person logging in choose from a list of cases freely, or is it always organized in a way that someone assigns them a case? What are the limits to what you can do? Are you permitted to change every bit of information in the case file, or are there some parts that are non-editable, read-only? How many people can be involved in a case? Are there different roles, for instance, or tasks for those? Like in the Netherlands, for instance, there's a legal team and then there's a support team, and they can both be involved in the case at the same time. They can work on the same file, and that the database needs to be set up to allow that, of course, and that needs to be built into it from the beginning. And the database can make sure that every single edit is logged, so that you can go back and see who did what, even who accessed or who viewed a file, and so on. And those are the sort of things that you need to sort out as you start building. And then, of course, there's the victim. One thing I found is you really have to make sure that you structurally, as you construct the database, separate victim data from case data. They are not the same thing. One victim can have many cases over the course of time, and one case could have more than one victim connected to it if you set it up that way. And that means that only information about the victim that could be considered permanent should be in the victim table. Things like name, gender, language, and age or age group, and then the contact info. There are organizations that put information about the victim's surroundings or other circumstances, like are they married or single? Is there a network around them? Are they on their own? Even their employment status or immigration status is entered into some systems. So only information about the victim, him or herself. And then ideally there's another section where the information about a current case is registered. This is all structural, basic database construction. How things then look on screen is another thing, but the structure is important. A lot of organizations told me that they have had to change basic foundational structural things because of decisions they made early on that were ultimately not working in the long term. So I was cautioned to think it through before committing to the basic structure. But the information about the case or event is where you log things like which crime or crimes was the person subjected to, the date and time and place for the crime, or if it was an ongoing situation, if there are special circumstances like domestic violence or hate crime, or if this crime was connected to a specific major event, perhaps, for instance, a terrorist attack, that could be logged. How did the case or the person reach the support organization? Did the victim contact us himself? How? Was it through email, phone, or chat service? The data may have come directly from the police, and then there will almost always be information about which unit or which region in the police service did make this this report, which officer has the case, and so on. And in some countries, they follow the case all the way to court, and then that sort of information is also added as the case moves along. And there may be a way even to record and help victims claim compensation, perhaps add a claims or injury report to the system itself. Additional assessments and categorization about the case victim. Mainly, there could be a priority system within the organization so that more serious cases are somehow flagged or prioritized within the system. You need to deal with this first, and that could be done automatically by the system itself, or it can be left to the coordinator to go through and then manually flag certain cases for the volunteers to pick. And a few organizations have formalized needs assessment built into their systems, and that can be anything from a free text field where you write a few words about the victim's needs to a long list of checkboxes with different needs to choose from, and then you just check as you talk to the victim. And then when it comes to risk assessment, that's almost never done inside the system, but there may be a reference to which sort of risk assessment has been done by professionals or the authorities, or at least there is a possibility within the system to flag something or a case as being an elevated risk for any reason or some reason. And that's then clearly visible, which cases are high risk and which are not. And then there is information about the actions of the service provider. Did you try to call? Did you have a face-to-face meeting? Did you send a letter, send a text, talk to someone? Many systems have the opportunity to add an instance of one of these actions or tasks one by one with an automatic time and date so that it becomes easy for the system to track and calculate how many actions did we take in this case, what did we do for this victim. And you can also log time spent, of course, on each case if that's of use to you. And sometimes you have to send the victim on to somewhere else, specialized services, for instance, and the action of doing that could also be logged in the system. I'll add a few other things that other organizations are doing in their systems, which can't be put into this list. It's not a cohesive run through here by any means, but still some of the highlights of what people are doing. There could be a tool for conducting follow-up interviews, or just automatically sending a link to a survey, a sort of client satisfaction survey. How did the victim find our support? What was their experience? Even what did they think about the reception from the justice system, from the police service, and so on. There could be a way of scheduling tasks, like, okay, now I've registered a letter that's going to be sent today, and then the system can keep track for me that in 1 week when I log in, it will tell me that today I need to try and call the victim, because that's the process in our organization, that sort of thing. The letter that you send could also be included into the system. There could be a template of letters to choose from that could be included. Then with the GDPR and personal data being a part of this, you could have a button somewhere that exports data that the victim, according to law, has the right to view, and make that easy for yourself. And you could set the system to automatically delete personal data and then just leave the statistical information after a specific time or date. ADT, it's automatic data transfer. Some lucky countries get this file from the police every morning with all the victim contact data, and then this is just imported into the victim support system. And then if you build that sort of thing into the system, then you have to have some sort of tool that makes it possible to compare entries to see if is this a person who's already in the system, is it a double entry or not. So that would have to be a part of that solution. There could be a place to schedule volunteers to be at a service point at a specific time, or to keep track of how many hours the volunteers have spent working. And finally, you also need to think about the basic tools of the system. How do you sort and filter? How do you do searches? What are those tools like? Are they user-friendly? Do they provide you with what you need to get a decent workflow? And of course, statistics. There could be anything from just a button that exports a raw file with data to Excel, and you then move on from there yourself. Or it could be a fully formed statistic visualization tool on screen connected to the system, and it could even be sending automatic reports to predetermined addresses each month, etc. I'll just repeat what I said here now. The potential building blocks, we're talking a helicopter view here. What would you need to build a fully fledged victim support case management system? You have foundational data, administrative and geographic data. You have data about the people in the organization doing the support and using the system. You will have access and security rules. Then there's data about the victim, data about the case or crime circumstances, additional info about the case, including a needs assessment and risk assessment, information about the actions of the service provider. And there's perhaps a follow-up or a survey, and then there could be a wide array of other tools, of which searching, filtering, and viewing statistics are the most important ones. Now, moving on from here and focusing a little bit more on the data collection part of this. One important basic aspect of data collection is making sure that the information is complete for each victim or each instance. If you have large amounts of cases with unknown data, you can't answer simple questions like how many people have you given support to, and how many of those are men, how many are women, how many came from Stockholm, etc. So you really need to decide and then enforce the minimum data collected for each victim. And when I viewed these different systems, I discovered that some of them only have a minimal amount of data points needed to start and then close a support case, and sometimes not even gender was registered. And then there's the other extreme, like the Czech Republic, where they still collect data manually and then they register it into a digital system. And they enforce collecting, I think, more than 20 data points, mandatory data points for every case. And they have done the same since the 90s. So they have a very solid base of statistical information going back decades for all of their cases. And what I think would be useful for us is to be able to compare across Europe on equal basis the data we have on victims and the services they need, not only for support organizations. I gather there is a lot of official statistics on reported crimes and court cases and even research papers and surveys where crime victims have been interviewed that may be of interest, but comparison I think is important. And so I would like to start the conversation within the Victim Support Europe family today on if and how we could find a way to register and then somehow compare the basic information about victims that we have access to. So this is something I'm thinking a lot about, and this is just a starting point. Ideally, we would then form some sort of working group or start a proper project on this, but just to start the conversation, here are some suggestions then for the basic data points that perhaps could be part of a mandatory collection of data for every single victim in every single country. Gender, of course, will be a very specific age group. It could be a specific age, but at least the ability to extract information about whether the victim is a child or an adult would be like the most basic value that you could have, I think. And I don't know if that age may be different across Europe. In Sweden, the line is drawn at 18. You'd have to look into that. The crime, of course, we're working mainly with crime victims, even though I know organizations like France Victimes have a broader approach. But there could be several crimes connected to a case, but at least a minimum mandatory rule would be that it's at least one crime registered for this, for every instance. And there are difficulties with this because there are differences between justice systems. Perhaps it could be done by agreeing to groups of crimes, such as, say, a group of violent crimes or the sexual crimes or property crimes, and then each country could at least divide their specific codes into these groups and submit statistics based on that. But there are, even when there are generally agreed upon translations for a crime, there may be differences in what is included in the term. In Sweden, for instance, the rape clause has changed so that it's no longer required for violence to have taken place in order to register it as a rape. But in other countries, it may only be considered rape if it's a violent incident. So that means it's not comparable. So there will be challenges sorting out these sort of things, and also challenges in sorting out how to count and relate the number of instances of crime, the number of cases, and then the number of victims to each other. And the victim's geographic location would also be very useful, preferably at the municipality level, at least. But if you have this data, these four simple data points, then you can do at least basic calculations. How many victims do the organizations help? How many of those are men and women? Are they children or adults? And are there differences in which types of crime people are subjected to according to which age group they're in or which gender they are? And you can also, of course, see whether victims are located big cities, rural areas on account of the geographic location. So I think those four data points could be a very basic starting point. But it wouldn't be impossible to expand the number of data points somewhat to perhaps include secondary information that would be useful to us. And these are some of my suggestions, and you may have other ideas. Is the crime reported or not reported? We do help victims who have been victimized but not having reported the crime yet, or may never report it. How large is that group exactly? And that's a data point that only we can find out because the police don't know about these people. And that's an important data point, I think, for us to measure. Initial contact by well, it's the question of how did they find us? Did they have to find us themselves? Did the police send them to us? Or did someone else refer them to us? And then some sort of information about how, which forum we got the contact through. Is it through email or chat service or phone or meeting? There are challenges here, of course, because many of these cases include many different contact forums during the same case. It may begin as a phone call and then go on as a meeting. And so the systems will then need to be set up to count every instance of action and so on. Because otherwise it can't be compared. But that's some of my thoughts this afternoon. That's a starting point, perhaps. I'd like to end my presentation there and then see if there is anything else that some of you have thought about. If there are any questions or thoughts, let me just move back then to stopping the sharing. Here it is.
Hi, Sophia. I have a question for you. Thank you for this very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
I'm curious to know more about your cooperation with governmental agencies and the police on building this digital platform. So can you tell us more, like how is this cooperation organized? How do they access the platform? Is it on a case-by-case basis, for example? And how did they welcome the initiative as well?
No, there's no access from the authorities to our system, but we've planned our system for the eventual import of this police data that I've been talking about. So and the authorities, particularly the what's it called, Fredrik? Brottsoffermyndigheten, the crime victim authority, they are very interested in us having a tool for follow-up questions for the survey for quality control. That's the main thing that the authorities have asked us to include in this. So that will be the priority now after launch. That will be the first thing that we build into it. But when it comes to the police data, we have just accepted the sort of data that they will send us, and then we've adapted our system to receive that in the future when and if they decide to send it in a more structured way, because today they're sending it via fax and email and letters and all sorts of formats. So that's the answer to that. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Are there any other questions or thoughts about this?
Sophia, it's Jennifer here. Would you mind if I came in with a question for you?
Yeah.
Will you be planning to write up your presentation in a way that offers people a shortcut to all of the work that you've done to compile all of this work?
Well, right now it's only in the form of a of a script and a PowerPoint presentation, but I have quite a lot of material from the research phase. It's very difficult to compile though, so I don't know if there will be a formal report of some sort. But this overview that I did today was more of trying to sort out, as I was saying, the different types of data collected and what would be needed and what would be useful in a system like this. And if there's interest from Victim Support Europe, I may well write something. I'd have to discuss that with Lev. Yeah.
It would seem really useful for the next person who's going to pick up the task to be able to draw and build on the platform you've created, than to start from where you began. So I could see real value in that. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I don't know if there are any more questions. Solène, is there anything else? Then.
Well, I'm thinking
Everyone's happy.
maybe to another question to you actually. So are you working on this platform with other victim support organizations in Sweden? And how does this cooperation work? Do they also provide data, for example, on victims? Or...
No, we're the only victim support organization for general victims of crime in Sweden. There are also very few other specialized services in Sweden. It's almost exclusively domestic violence women's shelters, and they have their own organizations. So this is all our own project. We do have a lot of data every year. We have 32,000 cases, as I said, and we're a population of 10 million. So it's if you're looking at the other victim support organizations in Europe, we do have quite a lot of data. So we think it's worth it, and we have the 71 associated local centers as well that will be using it. So it will be useful to plenty of people. I think. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. If there aren't any more questions or anything else that you need to discuss, then I hope that we can reach each other in case we need to through email or through Solène. If there's anything else that any of you want to ask me or the other speakers, and then if that's all, then we can finalize this in time for 4 o'clock. Thank you so much for everyone participating.
Thank you very much to everyone for joining us today. It was really lovely, and especially to our speakers for your really interesting presentations. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Solène. Bye.
Bye.